We're really excited to be doing this. We've done it, for a few communities now, and it's always a real pleasure to do this. So thank you again. We're very excited to be sharing this with the Belmont community. I should just quickly start by saying, before I answer the question, that this panel here, we don't claim to be sort of founders, if you like, of the Jewish community, but we do think that we were seed planters. We planted the seeds, as you'll hear, for the current community. And there were also several other members of the then community when we were there who were really big contributors, not only financially, but in terms of their leadership as well, into forming and creating this really, really special bond and special community that we created at the time. So I just wanted to very quickly mention that. So why did I go to Dubai back in February 2010? I mean, I think all of the panel members, we all have our own reasons for going. Certainly for me at the time, objectively, it probably seemed like a bit of an odd decision. I was this single Jewish 32-year-old female who'd grown up in a relatively Orthodox household with very strong Jewish identity, very strong links to Israel and so on. And I'd grown up in Jewish youth leadership movements. And, I think making the move to a Muslim world objectively, where being Jewish publicly at that time was uncertain, probably not possible, seemed like a bit of an odd move. And also I should mention, and all of us on the panel experienced this, when you apply for a work visa, you have to declare your religion. They always, ask what your religion is in the UAE. And at that time, Judaism wasn't actually even an option that you could select. It is nowadays, but it wasn't then. So again, we come back to this question of why did I go? It was a fantastic work opportunity. I'm a banking lawyer, and the opportunity presented itself to me. But when it did, it was presented to me by my then Jewish boss. And I think he popped his head around the door and said, would you like to go to Dubai to support a partner who's expanding our trade finance business? And I did sort of do a double take at the time. And I was given the opportunity to go to Dubai on what we call a meet-see, to meet the office and to go and have a look around. And the only people that I knew in Dubai were actually Sharon and Simon Eder. We'd grown up together. My brother and Sharon went to school together. They went to Emmanuel together. So they very kindly offered to host me for this long weekend. And I remember Simon collected me from the airport, and the first thing that struck me was the sunshine. I'd come from the miserable, rainy weather in London, and this was in December 2009, and the sun was beaming, and everything was shiny and beautiful. And I was just obviously very excited, first of all, by the sunshine. And then as we were driving through, I could see these really incredible structures and buildings and lots of building work, but also, there are some fantastic hotels in Dubai. And as we pulled up to Simon and Sharon's apartment, they lived on this mile-long stretch called the Jumeirah Beach Residence, the JBR, which was soon actually to be my home as well. Simon kind of entered the car park, and literally I could see the beach, like literally within 2 seconds walk of where they lived. And I just thought, this is absolutely fantastic. This lifestyle is going to be fantastic. Who could reject the opportunity? So I was really, really excited by that. And then as we walked up to the plaza level, there were all these fancy shops. I think there was even a Saks Fifth Avenue within about 2 seconds walk of the lift to where Sharon and Simon lived. And it was all very enticing. But the one thing I was concerned about was the Jewish factor. I did have a concern about that. As I said, coming from a relatively Orthodox household, how was I going to celebrate festivals? How was I going to celebrate Shabbat? The demands of my job were not going to allow me to travel home every time there was a festival and so on. So I was concerned about that. And I asked Simon and Sharon at the time, did they know any other Jews? And the only Jews they knew at that time in 2010 were Rana and Giacomo Arazi. Rana is obviously on the panel this evening, and vice versa for Rana and Giacomo. And they'd actually arranged very, very kindly for us to have a Shabbos meal at Rana and Giacomo's villa, which was in a place called Sakim. surrounded by, I think, approximately 5 mosques, within walking distance of about 5 mosques. And so we went for Shabbos dinner, and I remember Giacomo making Kiddush, and we were all sort of standing up and making Kiddush and so on. And I did kind of, there was a little bit of an air of, I don't know if it was discomfort as such, but I just, I was a bit uncertain. It was the first time I'd been in Dubai. There was no public acknowledgement that Jews lived in Dubai. And so there was an air of uncertainty for me. We were doing the right thing. I wasn't querying that. We were expressing our Judaism, but there was just an air of uncertainty. But I did relax in the end, and I was, felt very welcomed. I was very welcomed by Rana and Giacomo, and obviously by Simon and Sharon as well. But I sort of resigned myself to the idea that if I made this move for career purposes, it would primarily be for that and for sort of a bit of lifestyle, but that it wasn't going to be a very Jewish experience, and that there'd probably only be 5 of us, and how wrong I was, as you'll hear. So ultimately, career progression, tax-free salary, lifestyle, those sorts of things, personal challenge. I'd never really explored any Arabic countries. I'd lived in various countries all over the world, not really explored any Arabic countries. So personal challenge as well. So they were primarily my reasons. I knew it was a short-term contract. If I wasn't happy, I could come home. But I felt potentially the Jewish factor would be missing. And as you'll soon hear from everybody on this panel, I was very wrong. In terms of Jewish connections, literally within a few weeks of arriving in Dubai, I was at a brunch with a friend of mine called Toby, who happens to be Jewish, although he wasn't sort of particularly involved in the community. And he said to me, there's actually a Jewish couple here. And I literally couldn't believe it. And he introduced me to Boy Robin and Girl Robin, as they're fondly known still today. And I remember asking Girl Robin in particular about life in Dubai. They'd been there since 2008, life in Dubai as a Jew. And she said it's not really so, it's not so active. There's not so much going on. And I told her I was having Friday night dinner with Sharon and Simon that evening, Shabbos dinner, and she said, "Oh, I know another couple. We know another couple doing that this evening." And I sort of couldn't really quite believe that either, but that happened to be Bianca and Derek Hershowitz. Bianca's on the panel this evening as well. And eventually we all became connected. We eventually met Michael and Martine through mutual friends of Bianca and Derek, and Rana, Giacomo, myself, Simon, Sharon, Martine, Michael, Bianca, Derek, we all connected eventually. And I think it's probably fair to say that whilst there was certainly Jewish activity before 2010, kind of in terms of a regular community, I guess it really kind of kicked off then in 2010.
Thanks so much, Mia. That's a nice introduction as well. So if I can go to you, Sharon and Simon, once again, welcome to Belmont. Lovely to have you here. And I saw a little bit of chat, so thank you for answering some of those early questions that are coming up.
Thank you for having us, Rabbi Mark.
Oh, nice to see you again. So moving on to questions for you. So Mia's spoken about sort of 2010. So how did things start to develop from 2010? And were there opportunities, let's say, for example, when necessary to bring a rabbi in if that was needed, or what can you tell us about those early days?
So, to our home communities, we were persona non grata, leaving the comfort of Northwest London. Unfortunately, I think, in 2010, you weren't quite at Belmont yet. So we didn't have, what could have kept us as vibrantly connected in London. So, a bit like Jonah, from the book of Jonah, we fled what had been our inheritance here to go off to seek our inverted commas riches in Dubai. And sure enough, there we were, and we felt like complete fish out of water, having thought that we were going to be leaving in some way our Jewishness behind to pursue other possibilities. Actually, it came to haunt us. In our particular case, Sharon was pregnant with what was to be our eldest daughter, and we felt that there was something missing. And we came together with, basically, as Mia said, Mia, our great connector, our Aka Lubavitcher in-house, who had her Judah on, sought us all out, reminded us of what our mission might be, that there was a real need for Jewishkeit in Dubai. We came together, and I think truly we all did feel like fish out of water. Sharon was having our eldest daughter, and we said to ourselves that either we were going to make something happen for us, for all of us, for the next generation, or we'd go back to London. So we chose, unsurprisingly, the more exciting, more scary, more risky opportunity to make something happen. And we said, look, we're in Dubai, let's have it was coming up to the time of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we said, let's have an event, let's have a service. We need to come together, particularly for Yom Kippur. And we invited 2 rabbis from New York to come and help lead services. And of course, being Dubai, we had to make something biggest and best, and we decided to have the first, or what we believe to be the first service on the 32nd floor, no doubt the highest shul on the planet, at Derek and Bianca's home. And there was one instruction as these 2 Lubavitchers from New York came to Dubai. We said, please, whatever you do, make yourselves a little bit inconspicuous so that, we didn't stick out like a sore thumb. Anyway, Sharon had given birth, and we were keen to, unfortunately, our daughter wasn't so well when she was born, and we were very keen that the rabbis came to the hospital first stop. So anyway, together with a friend, we went to pick them up. I suddenly had this terrible dilemma. I told them to dress inconspicuously, but then I realized that there were so many other Islamic beards as well as Lubavitcher beards. How would they not just drift in the way that plenty of other men with beards drifted in? Of course, when they arrived, even though they were in baseball caps, you knew exactly who the 2 Lubavitchers were, and although I said, no formal hats, but their tzitzit were hanging out, no less. So anyway, all good. They arrived safely, carrying I think they carried Sefer Torah and plenty of other important elements to ensure that Yom Kippur was conducted. They came to the hospital, and they were cited to Hillel at our daughter's side. And a few days later, we had our first Yom Kippur service, and we turned to each other, as we did time and again, and said to ourselves, can you believe it? Here we are, and there is a Sefer Torah in shul. How incredible was that? I'm conscious there are plenty of others. These are just a few snippets, but in short, our Judahs were on. We realized that we needed to come together, and that's what we did. We created memory after memory, and those memories remain with us, and we planted a seed all together that came to lead to many, many other stories.
Wow. Clearly only tzitzit are a sign of a Jew in northwest London and not in Dubai.
I think, sorry, just if I can add one thing, sure. Is that from what Simon says was the beginning of the community, Yom Kippur, 2 years later, the community was so established and we'd come together so much, celebrating Chagim and Shabbat, that when I was pregnant for the second time, we were confident that whether we had a boy or a girl, we would be able to have the baby in Dubai. We ended up having a boy, and we had a mile come out. Our son had a proper Brit Milah in Dubai. So that really shows how in 2 years the community had evolved.
How do you get the knife in? Sorry, you know what? I jumped. I broke my own rule. No in between questions, but
It's okay.
Anyway, that wasn't your problem.
Fortunately not. And not only that, but from that seed, there was a couple who had a cousin. The couple were actually in Lebanon. They'd heard that there was a Brit Milah taking place in Dubai, and his cousin then facilitated for the Moel to then perform a Brit Milah a few days later. Actually, of all places, they met in Cyprus. So this Lebanese couple went to Cyprus. The Moel then went on to Cyprus to conduct another Brit Milah. So, like one thing leads to another.
That's amazing. Mitzvah Gorem mitzvah. One mitzvah creates the opportunity for another mitzvah, and that's wow. Thank you, guys. If I can move on to you, Rana. Welcome once again to Belmont. Thank you for joining us. If I can pose the following question to you. So, how did the community celebrate the Chagim, the festivals, and anything special specifically about being in Dubai for those festivals?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. There was everything special about the festivals. There wasn't anything that wasn't special about the festivals. And actually what made it so unique and so, warm was the fact that we were there with very little resources, near to none, and only each other really to rely on. So we came together knowing that it was very important that we had to teach our children about their roots and about Judaism. However, under whatever circumstances, it was a must. We had to do it. I moved to Dubai in 2008 with my husband and my son, who was 4 at the time, and my daughter was born in 2009. So, and my husband, who's from a very observant family, there was no question that we had to celebrate the Hagim and have Friday night every week. So we would come together, first 4 of us, then 6, then 10, then 20, and we would all bring a dish for the festival. We would celebrate according to our roots and where we were from. So if we hosted sorry, my daughter just banged her head. If we were hosting at my house, we would bring the Iranian roots, Iranian ways of celebrating to the festival. And we would gather in a very casual, relaxed manner on the floor with printouts of the prayers. And we would learn, we would teach each other, we would teach our children, we would talk to them, tell them exactly what the story was about, have them read. It was very, very warm and very, very comforting. It was particularly special when we would hold the Hagim in my villa, which eventually became the synagogue known as the Villa. We had 5 or 6 mosques surrounding us, and the imam would sing when it was time for call to prayer. And at the same time, at sundown, it was our turn to sing and our turn to pray. And Simon would be leading the prayers, and the imam would be singing in the background with his beautiful voice. And it was just spectacular. It was a really unusual but very, very spiritual experience to, hear these 2 religions merging together, and reminded us of really who we were and where we had decided to settle for that period of time. Eventually, Simon spoke of how we planted a seed and it started to grow, and 2 years later we had the rabbis come for Yom Kippur, which was most spectacular. And a year after that, my husband organized with Marble Arch Synagogue to bring in a full-size Sefer Torah that was smuggled in, or disguised, should I say, in a golf bag. And that was the first full-size Sefer Torah that still remains in Dubai at the moment within the community, the current community there. They call it the Red Sefer Torah. And the fact that it's still there, that it's still being used in the community and was brought over by our small little bubble community that we started in 2008, shows how important our seeds really were at the time. So yeah, Jewish life and Jewish experience was amazing. I miss it very, very much, actually, mainly because I truly learned so much about Judaism in Dubai, those 10 years that I was there versus the 30 odd years that I attended synagogue here in London, because it was so intimate, because we had no other choice. We only had each other. And yeah, it was a fabulous experience. Really enjoyed it.
Wow, amazing. I can't believe smuggling a Sefer Torah in a golf bag. That is quite remarkable. And me, I'm going to just a huge apology here. I just have to ask, was it off track? What was it dangerous? Not the Sefer Torah, but you said, you're singing with your group, Tefillah, and you're expressing your religion quite openly. Was that dangerous for you at all?
Well, I didn't really feel any type of discomfort or danger. Of course, we were always very, very careful. When we would have the Hagim in our house, it was my family home. I was raising my children there. So I would get emails from people, or people would just turn up at the house saying, we've heard, I've heard, we were told. And before I would give out my home address or share any information, I would really do my due diligence on them. I would stalk them on social media to find out about them, to try and find out as much as I could before giving my address to them. That was in terms of the community, but in terms of the Emiratis themselves, I never felt uncomfortable or, in danger at all. We would close the curtains and keep it moderate. We were very respectful of the land that we were on, because we knew that it wasn't a religion that we were allowed to openly practice. But no, I personally felt no danger. And also, being Middle Eastern, I understand, the Arabic culture. I speak, the language. I'm in tune with them, so I never felt a discomfort myself. No.
Thank you for sharing. If I can move over to Michael and Martine, once again, welcome to Belmont. You were in Dubai as a family with young children. So if you could tell us a little bit about why it was important for you to engage in Jewish family life specifically. And also, we heard a bit about children being born, but what about celebrating slightly older children's smachot? I think you made at least one bat mitzvah, a couple of bat mitzvahs out there, 2 bat mitzvahs. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. And again, thank you for having us. So when we moved out to Dubai in 2007, our daughters were 5 and 7, and it was really important to us to give them a Jewish identity. That's what Michael and I both grown up with, And interestingly, Michael and I were talking about this the other day, quite very recently. We were in St. John's Wood Synagogue a number of years ago, before they were born, and we were reminiscing about a sermon that the late Chief Rabbi Sachs was sharing about. He was talking about how parents come to him distraught because their children are marrying out, and he was saying that they don't understand why this is. And he was saying that, you know, of course, if you don't give your children the experience and the opportunity to practice the festivals and the fun ones, he said, not just the, you know, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, but all of the festivals, give your children the opportunity to choose and take it from there. And we'd both kind of forgotten that sermon, but it obviously gone very deep, because, you know, when we got to Dubai, we arrived with a lot of paraphernalia, because before we left, our daughters were both in a Jewish school, and we made a point of going shopping and buying lots of books, lots of child-friendly books, and masks for Pesach, and literally everything that you can think of. We even bought that was later. And we had this cupboard, this very special cupboard, and we put everything in there because we were obviously wanted to be low key, and we chose not to share that we were Jewish with all our friends, or most of our friends, to be honest. And so we had this special cupboard, and it was really important to us to do Friday nights, and, you know, in the same way that my parents and Michael's parents did Friday nights. And, you know, obviously being in a Muslim country, certain foods weren't easily accessible, like challah. So we made a point of making challah with our daughters, and we made it fun. And the girls even still today talk about how, you know, how profound those days were, and how, you know, what an impact it made on them. So
okay, I'll pick up. So I'll add on. Yeah. So the important for us was to pass on the values to our children that we had been given. I don't consider myself an observant Jew, but I'm a cultural Jew, and the values of Judaism are important. And so we had to augment what they obviously weren't going to get at school. And throughout the growth in the early years, we were Jewish because it was important to us, and we did it discreetly. You asked a question about praying loudly. I remember having a Seder at our house, and we had about 30 people. This is before we met the people around this table. It was another. There's always 30 people, but 25 of them are different every time, because it's an itinerant community. And I remember asking people not to sing too loudly, and actually on 2 different Seders we did that. So it was about being discreet. I also want to really add something, is that we knew that the authorities knew that we were Jewish. And that knowing that they then hadn't done anything meant that there was tacit acceptance and this huge word of tolerance. And it's really important to recognize that the Emiratis, in their own way, were saying, this is fine, just be discreet. Don't make this a problem for us, and you can be Jewish. And so that gave us the confidence to politely go forward as a guest in somebody's house. I was working for the builders of the Palm Islands, Nakheel, and so I was very cautious about being Jewish, and then I subsequently worked for a Saudi Arabian company. But all of the time it was about passing on and doing it for us, recognizing that as the community came together, there was more and more. I have to say that I built my first sukkah since the age of 13 when I got to Dubai, and Simon will laugh at this because he was always meant to be my project manager, but he never was very good at the project management. But how did we find Shkach? You walked out into the street and you looked for somebody who had been gardening and they'd chopped down their palm trees. You don't order it. You literally go and find it. So a whole lot of really special times, and a sense of intimacy. Oh yeah, sorry, I left out the 2 bat mitzvahs. So if our daughters were here, they would have had bat mitzvahs. So they were taught their portions and their stories via Skype at the time. And they had bat mitzvahs, the first 2 bat mitzvahs in Dubai. I think there was something else I was going to say, and I don't know. I can ramble on for 13 years of stories. But
if things come up, you can add in as we go.
No, I'm not allowed to. I get into trouble with the rest of the group.
Did any of you have a mezuzah up? Or you can maybe add that in when I come to. If I just interested, I assume that no mezuzahs for all the reasons you discussed.
There were. We kept our mezuzah on the inside, although I think I'm sure, no doubt now people may well keep them on the outside. And we know of somebody. There were plenty of diamond dealers who maybe came via Israel on their European passports, and the diamond exchange was set up very much with the endorsement of Sheikh Mohammed to Lev Levayev, and a load of other Israeli, big Israeli diamond dealers. Anyway, a key supporter of the community had a huge mezuzah in the diamond exchange, in the diamond bourse, like there from the time that we knew.
Wow.
I think also, just to add, the Chabad rabbis actually brought some mezuzah over with them. This is one of they were so amazing when they came. I mean, they bought so many things with the materials and so on. And one of the things they bought was mezuzot for us, for those of us that didn't have. And as Simon said, we placed them on the inside of our doors. So we did have.
I think also that the key thing is, Martine, I know, shared today with all of us from Amazon UAE that you can now buy kosher for Pesach matzah via Amazon to Dubai, which is of course great. But what it doesn't have, that we all experienced, was the struggle, the pain, the innovation,
Flipping the matzahs over.
Thought, the difficult thought process that we
Just
all need to go to. Sorry, Rabbi.
That's just eating the matzahs.
Just eating them, exactly. I know Sharon and I, for example, one year brought over matzah from Israel via Jordan, and that.
You bought me some as well.
Even
I had my request.
So now the click of a button on Amazon, it's what's that? Easy, no fun.
Well, I'm conscious to go to Bianca because she's travelled the furthest and got up the earliest. For those of you that joined a bit late, Bianca's currently in Australia. Where are you? Sydney or Melbourne or somewhere else? Sydney. So welcome to Belmont from Sydney. And it's not Derek. I think Derek's your husband, I assume. Right.
Yes.
This is Bianca.
So Derek unfortunately isn't feeling so well. It's not corona. There is no corona in Australia. And I'd be absolutely flabbergasted if he was the person that brought it back in. I think we would be absolutely shunned. So just plain old flu. But yes, thank you so much for having us, and happy to be here.
Thank you. We wish him better. Refuah shalema. So just a simple question. What for you was special about being Jewish in Dubai?
Right. So sure, there was so much. So I think that every story that you've heard actually has a backstory to it. As you've heard, a lot of people came from a much more assimilated sort of background. They felt more comfortable being in an Arab country or coming from Arabic roots. We did not. And being South African, we are Jewish South Africans first and foremost. And we, the same as the UK, have a very vibrant Jewish life. Derek's parents are Orthodox, and they were very modest when we turned around and told them that we were moving to Dubai. But I had an auntie phone me to say, "Oh, Cookie, I didn't realize that Dubai was in the United Arab Emirates." So that was pretty much how everyone seemed to kind of think of us going out to Dubai. Derek and I were meant to go for 18 months. And when we told our rabbi we were going, he said, well, farewell to the Hershkovitz family, who are going to become the unofficial shluchim of Dubai. And we just kind of shook our heads and said, doesn't he know we're just going for a quick stint? Hopefully we'll make some money and we'll be out of there as quick as can be. Little do we know that we weren't, that was actually the reality. So we try to leave Dubai quite extensively. I myself cried for my first 18 months until I found other people that had like-minded sort of goals. And I really do believe that you are where you're meant to be, and we were meant to be in Dubai for that period of time. So for me, what made Dubai incredibly special was A, the backstories, and B, the people who are on this panel. So when, as you can imagine, when we were talking about bringing in the two rabbis from New York, we had it in our home. We were incredibly excited, nervous, skeptical, worried. And I turned around and said, well, we're happy for them to have a service here, but I'm not so sure how I feel about them staying here, which is why they stayed at the Nates and then they moved over. But when they came, you know, I think someone must have texted and said the rabbis are here or the rabbis are in the building, and you kind of wait with a little bit of anticipation. So when they came upstairs, they had a bag, it was like Mary Poppins bag, but full of Jewish things. So they started bringing out mezuzahs, and they started bringing out, I don't know, they brought my son was then 4 months old, and they brought him a yarmulke and tzitzit and when they took out the Torah and they put it on our dining room table, as we said, we lived on the 32nd floor. There wasn't a lot of sunshine that came through there. And when they started to open up the Torah, there was a beam of light that hit the scrolls. And for me, that sort of solidified the fact of life, that you are where you're meant to be. It doesn't matter how difficult it could be or what else is going on in the background. There's always a reason why things happen. And I felt like our time in Dubai and our meeting of the people on this panel were absolutely bashert. I think that's what made it so special for me.
Wow, I've just got this vision of that sunshine, you know, like, oh, you know, like,
it really was like that moment.
There's those meant to be moments. I always look at those either coincidence moments that we see. What does our faith teach us about that? Don't worry, it's not a sheer people, but I always feel like when you get those moments, it's like God waving. Genuinely, that's how I feel. Like when you have like a happenstance or one of those, it's like God saying, notice I'm here, and we can choose to ignore them or we can embrace them. And it sounded to me like you most certainly embraced that, almost had a big sort of Jewish hug, which is, wow, amazing. We've got a bit of Kirk to ask another question each. Can we go around? Oprah can just wait, okay, people? She's not as important. That interview is not going anywhere. We've got you for a few more minutes, if that's okay. Mia, so we've heard a little bit. So can you think any specific sort of Jewish meaningful event from your time in Dubai that stands out maybe more than the others?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's so many. It's just to mention very quickly before I go into my story, though, which is that we were talking earlier about the Seder and matzahs and so on that Sharon and Simon had brought in. And the first Seder we had was literally just Sharon, Simon, me. And there was a trainee at my law firm who happened to be Jewish, and his non-Jewish mate who kind of joined us. And so they were just, you know, we were kind of just us sitting around. And I remember at the time, Sharon and Simon said to me, you know, this was in February 2010 before we connected with everyone. And they said to me, you know, there's an alternate Seder going on this evening of about 30 Jews. And I basically said, I don't believe, you know, I said, that's absolutely not possible. I just literally, I don't know where you got that from, but that's just not possible. And I've only recently found out that that was one of the Seders that Martine and Michael have been hosting. So it was true. Anyway, that's just a side point. So I think for me, you know, one of the most significant Jewish events for me was hosting Yom Kippur in 2011 in my apartment. I also lived on the 32nd floor, so in the JBR as well. Bianca and Derek were in the JBR as we stayed, and so was Sharon and Simon. We actually have a photo of this. The Chabad rabbis were there again, and I think there were either 30 or 40 Jews who attended, and it was still kind of early days for us in 2011 in terms of our community. And what the photo, it's a really lovely photo. I kind of wish I'd put it up actually for everybody to see, but it was obviously post the fast, by the way. It was when we'd broken the fast that it was taken. But what it doesn't show is sort of the nerves. I did feel nervous, the nerves leading up to hosting hosting Yom Kippur. What was I going to tell my boss at the time? And also, you know, just a bit of concern over if my landlord had heard anything, or other, you know, other people in other apartments and so on. And also my mum was with me. My mum had flown out to see me, and I was very conscious, A, that she felt comfortable, and B, that she would have the Orthodox service that she was expecting that she would have had in her Mill Hill community. She was actually in her element, my mum. So she, you know, she had a great time and really enjoyed engaging with everybody, including the rabbis. And as I said, they had a very, very calming effect. And I distinctly remember a conversation. They really generated Jewish conversation, the Chabad rabbis. You have to remember that we have a community of Jews from all different denominations of Judaism, as you can even see from the panel. But they really generated Jewish conversation. There was a conversation about whether we should have a mechitza, which Michael will remember fondly. And it really wasn't about whether there should be a mechitza or there shouldn't be a mechitza. It was about the fact we were having this conversation in Dubai, which was obviously very special. And we'd set up the room, and I think actually, as I said, the Simon and the Chabad rabbis had managed to get hold of all the materials that we needed, the service and so on. Which was amazing. So we'd set up the room, and I think literally about sort of 2 minutes in to the service, there was a knock on the door, and I was, you know, beside myself, wondering what this was, you know. And Simon kind of came outside with me. I think he was still in his, you know, had his tallis on and his kippah and everything else. Came outside with me with another gentleman who was with us from the community at the time. And the two security guards just wanted to know why everybody was walking up and down the stairs. I mean, there's no aircon in the stairwells. And they just didn't understand, you know, it's a security risk if you're not in the lift and so on. They just didn't understand it. And so eventually, I think Simon said to them, you know, established that they were Hindus, and that I think he said, you know, you have either, you know, you have special days in your calendar. Well, we're walking up the stairs because this is a special day for us. And that was the end of it. And they left us in peace, and they went downstairs again, and that was the end of it. And I think once we got really kind of into the service, once there were no interruptions, eventually what happened was just amazing. You know, as we all know, you know, on this call, Yom Kippur is intended to be really a day for introspection. But if you can imagine either 30, I think it was 30 or 40 Jews from varying backgrounds, unified singing the songs of the Yom Kippur service at the top of our voices, you know, this was really exhilarating and very, very empowering. And I distinctly remember at that moment, you know, really feeling quite emotional and looking out of the window through to my balcony across the Marina Mall. And I said to myself in that moment, one day I'm going to tell this story, definitely, you know. So I think that's probably a fundamental, significant event for me.
Thanks, Mia. Back to Sharon and Simon. We've spoken up until now about what people feel and what you've all felt about sort of moving there and your Jewish identity. How do you think that your Jewish identity today has been impacted by the fact that you lived those years in Dubai? How many years were you in Dubai?
6.5.
Right.
So but also I think it was quite a formative time because we had 2 children there, so it was quite big. I think on lots of different levels. So on a Jewish level, we both grew up in London in traditional families. I went to a Jewish day school all the way through. I sort of took it for granted. So I think it's what everyone's touched on the panel, how special and how we all had to come together to create these events. You know, you weren't going to walk into the synagogue that we created and see a Sefer Torah if someone hadn't gone to the effort of bringing, you know, it was all very thought out. Also, I think it's that every single person counted. And I think it was really the essence of what being Jewish is about. So I think if you look at this panel, we all came at different stages in our lives with different outlooks and with different backgrounds. And we're just an example of many others. It wasn't just us, as we kept repeating, but we all came together and made it special, like under because we wanted to keep and we wanted to celebrate. And coming back, I think I know that my Judaism has been enriched because a lot of what I do is because I did it in Dubai. So when it comes to Pesach, we now have spring onions, and that's something I learned from Rana, because that's her Iranian background, that she does. There's certain foods, and it's all come from that. I think another something that's lasted with me is the acceptance that I did feel. We lived very much within a community, and we came home making Arab friends, Arab Muslim friends, and the tolerance. And we did share our Judaism with them, and the tolerance that we felt. So very quickly when we left, the last thing I took down from our apartment was our mezuzah, and my neighbor, who was Tunisian, came and she'd wrapped it up, and she said, "I think you forgot this, and I wanted to keep it safe for you." And I think, like, ultimately we'd created such a Jewish experience that, and I always love the story that our daughter, who was 3.5, when we came back, we were in Brent Cross, and there was like a Christmas tree, and she said, "What is this?" I said, "You know, it's a Christian country." And she said, "Oh yes, because we used to live in Dubai, which was a Jewish country."
That's wonderful.
I think what we really learned from our time like there that we cherish is that we all there, unless we did something like all together, then like nothing would happen. In established communities, I think Jews like live in like roughly 10 cities in the world where things are established, and and Jewish life like happens. But as this tiny Jewish community, and obviously Jews that are part of smaller Jewish communities like will no doubt feel like unless like they have like the commitment and dedication to like make things happen, like nothing will happen. And like truly, like letters in a scroll of Torah, we all came together to form relationships and bonds and like make things happen, and that we truly cherish. I think the other thing that we really felt is that perhaps been reflecting on this like a little bit like recently, but like Jews throughout our history seem to always live in dialogue with either Christians or Muslims. When we first went to Dubai for my job, I had an opportunity to choose between Singapore or Dubai, and there was something like natural that made me pick Dubai. Sharon's family are from the Middle East. Her mum's from Libya, her father was from Iraq, and there was something I think very natural, certainly with Sharon as an Ashkenazi with a deeply Ashkenazi background. I had a lot to learn. I still do. I'm still learning. I'm still undergoing my Sephardi conversion. I'm forced to eat rice at Pesach and so on, but there was something very like very natural about the environment, and I think Judaism has always been enriched through that encounter with the other, and in this encounter that we had that helped plant the seeds, obviously far more than just us, but in what we did as this tiny group of Jews in the Arab world, like that now has led to the fastest growing Jewish community in the Arab world, hopefully has enabled many encounters to take place, and this ongoing important journey and the important opportunity for Judaism to be enriched by this, and to help create the peace that we all so search for.
Wow. Spoken so beautifully. Thank you, guys. Sharon, we talk about your mezuzah. It's such a contrast when I was at university in Leeds and our mezuzah kept getting nicked. Maybe I should have gone to uni in Dubai. Going over to Rana, what made you decide to leave Dubai in the end?
Well, we were there from 2008 till 2015. My husband left a year later, actually, just to kind of shut everything down. We had a thriving business. You know, we started in Dubai, so you know, it was a shame to leave when we did, but we felt compelled to leave, really, because my son was turning 11, and we were very mindful that he had to start learning for his bar mitzvah, and we weren't ready to have a bar mitzvah there. Giacomo comes from a very observant family, and it was very important for him to have a, you know, proper traditional bar mitzvah. But more to the point was Marco, my son. He was starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable within himself. He wasn't experiencing any type of anti-Semitism or anything negative. In fact, we never told him to never express his Judaism if asked. We said, if somebody asks you about your religion, you tell them. Don't ever lie, don't ever hide it, but just don't, you know, announce it. It's not something that you need to discuss unless someone asks you. But he was feeling it. He was the only Jew amongst his peers. You know, his best friend Osama and his, you know, playmate Muhammad, and plenty of other religions, the Hindus and Christians and even Baha'is, but he was the only Jew. And he was really, really, really feeling it. And he came home one day and he said, Mom, and he wasn't really sure what he was saying or why he was saying it, but he just said, Mom, I just don't feel like I belong. And we thought, okay, well, you know, that's a sign. We're not going to stay here forever anyway, and it's a good time to go. So really, that was the main reason. Yeah, so that's when we decided to exit. Again, we miss our Jewish life very much in Dubai. We really, really do. Our hagims are not the same. We go to synagogue and we're a little bit blue that we're not, you know, sitting around on the floor with, you know, with our printed out scripts and, you know, to being together and learning and really, really learning. So yeah, that was it, really, the main reason why we left.
Wow. So now you just go to shul sort of fade into the background as opposed to
right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's not the same, but yeah, that's okay. I mean, my husband stayed on an extra year, and that's when the current community, because it, you know, I think it was Sharon who mentioned that we all played a part. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't you know, decided or thought out. We all did the best we could to bring a community together, and it just so happened that we had a home that was, you know, vast enough to host many people. So we would use my home as the venue, and it became, towards the end, the last year and a half or so that we were there, as the community grew and grew, it just became a natural venue for people to come to do the Hagim and praying on Saturday morning or whenever it was needed. And when we left, Giacomo then offered the our home to the community to come and use it at any point, whenever they wanted. And so that just developed and grew, and eventually our home became known as the Villa. So when Giacomo left, we introduced him to our landlord, who was a personal friend of mine, who knew full well what was going on by then. And so they started to raise money to keep, for the upkeep of the villa. And so that's how it started to evolve. It just moved on from there. Wow.
Well, all your stories and experiences, all of it, it's just amazing. A couple more questions. There's also been loads going on in the chat, so it's lovely. So it's all kept it going. On to Michael and Martine. What would you say was the key ingredient or sort of success factor in the community coming together to grow specifically?
Okay, I'll have a first start at this one. It was acceptance of anybody at face value. If you chose to identify as a Jew and you walked through the door, we accepted you as a Jew. Most people at the time who went to Dubai didn't go for a Jewish experience. They went as economic migrants. So there were lots of people from less observant backgrounds and of couples who might, one partner would have been Jewish and the other might not have been Jewish. And so the ability to, the ability is the wrong choice of word, the acceptance that you came and joined us, that's fine. You didn't have to be anything. The only thing was if you brought food, please make it kosher-esque. So it had to be fish and less, and down the food chain, so to speak. And so we all came and we all shared, and there were no rules. And this is also something which Simon alluded to, is that most of us have experienced walking into a structure, a Jewish structure system, and having to conform or having to be that. We didn't have any of this. So we made it up for us, made it up for ourselves. Our chazan and cantor was Simon, who sings beautifully. But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And we never shouted at him if he got a word wrong, because we didn't know any better. But we all loved it. And this is the point that I really want to bring home, is that in order for communities to grow, they need to be inclusive. It's not about exclusivity. It's about anybody can walk through the door. And I'm not going to ask them to do something that is in my rules. I'm just so delighted they're here to share with us. And that's what helped us. So I made a joke earlier that there were always 30 people, but 20 of them were different. But that was it. There's the people around this and a couple more families, and then others kept coming and going. We didn't always know everybody was there. There were always 5 new people, and who was in the country. And it's something really, really important. The other success factor, I think, is, and Martine alluded to this, is that when my late mother moved from South Africa to New Zealand, she couldn't find a challah the way it was made in Cape Town, in Auckland. So she found a recipe and started cooking it. And then when she came and visited us in Dubai, she taught Martine and the girls. And so it was this very tactile nature of the children making stuff with their hands and experiencing religion with their fingertips, to the extent that now both Ella and Freya at the University of Edinburgh are both involved in JSOC, and Ella made challahs for, I don't know how many, 40 people. So it's this real importance of acceptance without judgment. I'm just delighted you've walked through the door. I don't care if you don't have a kippah. Come and sit down and join us.
Yeah, and it was definitely the warmth as well, and that sense of belonging. It goes so deep, because I mean, for me personally, there's been times when I've gone to shul and not really felt very comfortable, because I'm not very learned, and yet being in this environment where we all had to pour together, it was just such a great opportunity to learn, and I learned so much, and at the same time felt like I really belonged. So I think that probably was the experience for a lot of people that came through the door. And also when people found out that there was a Jewish community, the excitement, I mean that was the most beautiful thing, when people would find out that there was a Jewish community and they would arrive at one, because we would host in our different homes, and people would arrive and they were like, wow, I can't believe there are other Jews here. And so it was just that excitement as well. It was amazing.
I wonder what it would be like to go in 5 years' time, and would it still have the wow factor?
We can answer that for you. So we were there 12 years, and we watched from us and 4 people around the Seder to 30 to 40 to 100 people at a catered Seder. And then we watched it go from occasional to regular services to Orthodox services to separation, and a service that anybody walking out of an Orthodox shul here would recognize. And it's not the same.
And a growing mechitza.
And a growing mechitza.
Yeah. Higher and higher.
But that's because I have daughters, I really want them to be able to see me as well. So it has already changed, it's formalized, it's crystallized. And when people arrive there now, they give the current community shtick for why can't I get kosher chicken? What do you mean kosher chicken? So the expectation is no longer of what anything is wonderful. It's like, why isn't there more? And it's not the same. It's become a community. For us, it was a friendship group, a fraternity.
So it's so interesting. One final main question, if I can go over to you, Bianca. Having lived and worked, as I understand, in multiple countries all over the world, from South Africa, Singapore, Australia, and of course Dubai, does anything stand out specifically that makes Dubai different from all of those?
So when Derek and I first arrived in Singapore, I arrived with a toddler in my hand and a baby on my hip, and I went to the Jewish Community Center. And the Rebbitzin came up and she introduced herself and said, "Oh, are you new?" etc. And that was like, it was such a wow feeling, because I thought to myself, oh, it's amazing, you know, there's something that's already here. And I put my hand up to say, you know, hit me up. If there's anything that I can do to kind of be involved in the community, let me know. And she, in some ways, was also a bit taken back by that sort of stance. She's like, oh, okay, that's really good. Because I think that oftentimes people move to a community or are involved in a community and they expect people who are more religious than them or more learned than them to kind of take the bat and run with it. Whereas from our experiences in Dubai, we were the community, we were the Rebbitzin, we did everything together. You know, it was a real do-it-yourself community. A story we have is that we were vying for a taxi and another couple were vying for the same taxi, and Derek said to them, "Oh, I don't suppose you're going to this area?" And they said, "Actually, we are." And I like elbowed him in the ribs and said, "Why would you even ask strangers to share a taxi?" Anyway, it turned out while we were in the taxi with them that their best friend had arrived, and he was Jewish from New York. So after his 5-year stint in Dubai, he turned around and he said, "You know, I've had more Jewish experiences with you guys than I had my whole life growing up in New York." And, you know, I come from a traditional family, Derek comes from an observant family, but we were by no means going over there to take on the reins and create this amazing community. It just kind of happened for us.
Wow. All wows. And to finish off, I genuinely, by the way, you have to know that we lost about 10, 12 devices, and that is it. So you guys are bigger hits than Oprah. There are still about 70 participating devices. So we've got well over 120, 130 people still watching you guys. So your stories are enthralling and inspiring, and just wow. So if anyone else out of all of you here, if you've got any maybe a final thought, final comment, maybe a funny story, whatever you want to share. I think people have been asking their own questions throughout the chat, which you've been answering. If anyone's question wasn't asked, then feel free maybe to unmute yourself at the end, but we'll give the panelists a final opportunity. Yeah.
I'll share something amusing. I mean, the panel have heard this story quite a number of times, but I still think it's quite amusing, which is that, and we've all got what I would call conversion stories, if you like, or stories about, you know, what was placed on our visa in terms of our religion. We've all got those sorts of stories. For me, I guess I did share the fact that I was Jewish with many people that I met, but I didn't share the fact that I was Jewish with my ex-boss Mohammed, who became and still is a really good friend of mine. As you know, he was at my Orthodox Jewish wedding in London in 2017, which was a big honor for my family and I. But I hadn't shared the fact that I was Jewish with him. I'd moved jobs. So when I first went to Dubai, I worked for a law firm, and for some reason, I don't know why, they'd put that I was Catholic on the drop-down menu. I don't know if you could select anything else, whether you could select not applicable or whatever, but they'd put that I was Catholic. I think they thought it was easier for the obtaining the alcohol license. That was my understanding at the time. So they put that down. And when you move jobs in the UAE, you have to reapply for a work visa. And of course, you have to answer the question again, the same question. And I hadn't told Mohammed I was Jewish. And then when I resigned, we were having sort of a goodbye lunch. And this was a couple of months before I came home. And he said to me, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, but Mia, but you're Jewish, aren't you? And of course I said yes straight away. And he said, you know, he said, I'm really upset that you didn't tell me that you were Jewish. He said, why didn't you tell me? You know, did you think it would be a barrier to me hiring you? It was not going to be a barrier, you know. He said, I would have been so respectful of the fact that you were Jewish. He said, I'm really, really upset that you didn't tell me. I said, well, I didn't tell you because, you know, when I applied, when I originally had a work visa, it said I was Catholic, and I didn't really think it was appropriate. 18 months later, I think it would have looked a little bit odd had I converted from Catholicism to Judaism with 18 months of living in the UAE. You know, it just didn't seem quite right. Maybe seemed a bit odd. So of course, you know, he laughed and so on. So that's one of my amusing stories. I think everyone's got amusing stories, like, you know, similar other amusing stories too.
I've got a story that's not amusing, but it's of how my understanding of being in a religion where men and women don't touch. So when I went for our job interview with Nikhil at the very start, I was interviewed by two women, one who had her head covered. So as I walked up, the one put out her hand to shake my hand and the other one didn't. And I didn't try to shake her hand. I instinctively knew from my culture that she didn't want me to try to shake her hand. And I remember with hindsight, her recognizing I hadn't tried to shake her hand. And I think it was a very big deciding factor in me actually getting the job offer because of understanding cultures and different cultures. And the similarity in many ways between Muslim and Jewish traditions, particularly the food, unbelievably the food, really is something we should focus on and grow together and understand more.
Wow, thank you. It's very different from my grandmother at my grandfather's shiva, who whenever one of my friends would walk in, she would ask, are you a shaker or not a shaker? Just straight up. So cultural sensitivities. Any closing final comments from anyone else on our panel?
Just building on Mia's comment earlier around the religion that we would need to input in order to obtain our ID cards, and that when we first arrived, there was no opportunity, as Mia said, to input Jewish, and I think, you know, various of us, you know, put Christian or whatever. And our daughter, born in 2010, she was a Christian. By the time that our son was born, a few years later, there was the opportunity to write Jewish. It shows how times had changed, and they did change in noticeable ways that we realized during our time. So we started off as Moranos, and by the time we left, we had the opportunity to
Jewish son.
We had a Jewish son by the time we left.
Rana, or any, would you like to final word, say goodbye?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah, sorry. If you want to say goodbye, you have a funny thing or something to say.
I'm trying to think of something. I can't actually think. Well, I can tell you about our amazing experience of Hanukkah in the desert, which was quite incredible. One of another member of the community who still lives there, actually. He's lived there all his life, interestingly enough. He built the most beautiful Hanukkah. It was 6 foot by 6 foot, absolutely fabulous. And you know, we dug a hole and stuck it into the sand, and we lit a barbecue, and we danced around this massive Hanukkah in the desert, and you know, these camels just like floated by, and it was surreal. It was just incredible. An experience that we never imagined in our life that we would ever have, and unfortunately may not have again. But you can just imagine this, you know, 30, 40 people gathering with a fire and the Hanukkah lit, and you know, all our headlights on so we can see what we're doing, and it was great. It was really wonderful. I mean, all of our experiences were that warm and that close and together. We really were so united, and we always used to, jokes always flying around about being Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and no one was ever insulted about anything. And the abundance of food from all the different cultures and you know, corners of the world, and what we did for each other was quite amazing. You know, some of us who weren't kosher would bring kosher food from London in our suitcases, and it was just united. We were just together, and without wanting to reap any rewards or you know, for anyone to pat us on the back. It wasn't egotistical at all. It was very organic and very natural. And yeah, without Dubai, we would have probably never met, all of us. And it was really a pleasure to connect with all of these people. A lot of the people who I can say are still my good friends. So yeah, it's great.
Thank you. Final words just to say goodbye to Bianca. How's Tuesday doing?
It's going to be a long Tuesday, I think.
We wish Derek better.
Sorry? We
wish Derek better.
Thank you, but thank you so much. This has been really lovely to kind of be a part of your community. And I messaged Ron before this call and just said, you know, we've had more conversations in the last 6 months or than we've had in about 10 years. So it's wonderful for us to be able to kind of reconnect and to almost feel like we live in London.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all of you for joining, for coming, for sharing, for most certainly inspiring us here in Belmont, and a few extra people as well that joined. You had a great turnout, and it's one thing getting a good turnout. It's another thing maintaining and retaining the people, because what you're saying is it's fascinating, and it's very insightful. And I think, you know, I was talking to Mia about how to frame it and what to say and what not to say about what we're going to be speaking about tonight. And she said, we weren't the first. You might not have been, all of you might not have been the first, but you were certainly pioneers. And I don't use that term loosely. And whether you want to take the credit for that or not, tough, because I'm giving you the credit for that. Just from what you told us. And I'm sure you realize that because of your efforts, you most certainly laid all the groundwork for anything that they can build now because of the current political scene. You most certainly enabled sort of you sort of did all that digging and all that planting and created by being what we call a Kiddush Hashem. You went out and you were very respectful, understood what you were doing and what you needed to do, and that would have most certainly rubbed off on the people that you came into contact with outside of our faith and community, and therefore can only but enhance inclusivity and sharing and peace, and that's what we want. And as I say to every time I speak in an interfaith event, I always say, talk. Just let's talk, let's share, let's speak, and let's live in a tolerant and harmonious way. And that's what you did, and that's just wonderful. It's amazing. So really thank you, and thank you for your time this evening. All the last hour and a half has literally flown by, and I could listen to your stories, and I hope to meet all of you, those I haven't met in person. And someone just asked, where's Belmont? You need to come and visit. You need to come and visit. We're just up the road from Stanmore, and if you don't know where Stanmore is, then you really got to know London better. But
it's my father-in-law in South Africa, so you've got a wide audience.
Ah, okay. Well, welcome, South Africa. We also like biltong around here. Love biltong. And that's probably quite easy to bring into Dubai now, because you don't have to refrigerate it or anything. I think we'll call it, probably not. We'll call it an evening. I'll let you guys go. Thank you to everyone for joining. This was recorded. And so thank you. And anyone watching on Facebook or USTV, thank you for joining us here in Belmont. Loads more programming coming up, especially in the run up to Pesach and after. And have a great week, everyone. Thank you once again to Mia, to Sharon, to Simon, to Rana, to Martine, and to Michael, and to not Derek, but to Bianca. And have a lovely evening or day. Take care.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.